Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step through a curtain of winter snow toward a medieval city gate, where the wind is needling your cheeks, the road is turning to iron beneath your boots, and the last orange light of day is fading behind a crown of towers. You are not a knight, not a lord, not someone with a dramatic cloak billowing heroically in the storm. You are the person who must keep the gate, listen for trouble, count the late arrivals, and somehow sleep in a little house built into the wall while the weather tries to remove the roof. And yes, you probably won't survive this if your plan is to complain about weak Wi-Fi and underfloor heating. Medieval winter is not here for your comfort. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell us where you are listening from, and what the local time is there. Now, dim the lights, and let the snow gather quietly in the road as you trudge toward the gate. You come up from the outer track just as dusk thickens into that bluish hour when the world seems to hold its breath. The city wall rises ahead of you, dark and damp, its stones patched with old repairs, moss, soot, and frozen threads of water. Snow does not fall in pretty Christmas card flakes tonight. It comes sideways, slanting hard out of the north, tapping your wool hood, clinging to your eyelashes, finding the small opening at your collar with the persistence of a tax collector. The gatehouse stands like a squared jaw in the wall, two towers shouldering the entrance between them, above the arch. A narrow chamber glows with firelight through a slit window, and the smoke leaking from a chimney hole is instantly bullied flat by the wind. The whole building feels less like a house than a stubborn stone animal crouched against the storm. But this is where you will pass the night. Lucky you! Cozy, in the sense that a lock cupboard is cozy. The road beneath you is churned with hoof marks, cart ruts, frozen mud, and the fresh white covering that politely hides all the ways a person can fall over. Your boots crack through a thin skin of ice, then sink into wet slush. Somewhere behind you, beyond the last fields and hedges, the open country disappears into grey. Somewhere in front of you, behind the wall, the city is preparing to close itself like a fist. Medieval towns often had gates that were shut at night, especially in times of disorder. Plague scares, war, or simple ordinary caution. That is your first solid fact to settle beside your pillow. A gate is not just an entrance, it is a filter. It decides who belongs, who pays, who waits, who freezes, and who gets told, with all the tenderness of municipal paperwork, to come back in the morning. You reach the outer edge of the ditch, where snow has softened the slope and filled the darker hollows. The ditch is not the dramatic boiling moat of storybooks, complete with crocodiles and a soundtrack. It is mostly a defensive cut in the earth, probably muddy, unpleasant, and deeply annoying to cross in bad weather. Still, it gives the wall a little more height and makes an attacker work harder. Medieval life is full of these practical disappointments. No crocodiles, just wet feet. A small timber bridge leads you across, its planks slick under your soles. You take your time. This is not the hour for heroics that's slipping. The wind pushes at your back as if impatient with your carefulness. Your fingers ache inside your mittens. They are wool, and wool remains warm even when damp, which is one of those quiet blessings people understood long before modern outdoor brands began charging a month's rent for technical fabric. At the far side of the bridge, the gate arch looms above you. The doors are open for now. Huge wooden leaves strengthened with iron straps. Dark with weather and years of hands pressing against them. One door shudders in the gusts, held by a chain. The iron fittings complain softly. Creak, knock, sigh. The noises carry strangely under the arch, deepened by stone, so that every small movement seems older than itself. A cart is waiting just outside, its wheels rimmed with freezing mud. 2 oxen stand before it, broad heads lowered, breath steaming around their muzzles. Their driver is hunched under a patched cloak and muttering at the weather with the sincere creativity of a man who has been cold since noon. In the cart are sacks of grain or maybe malt. Tied under a rough cover, one corner has slipped open, and snow is dusting the top sack like flour over bread. The gate sergeant, your older companion for the night, stands beneath the arch with a lantern hooked over one arm. He has the permanent squint of a man who distrusts both strangers and weather. And frankly, he has reasons. Beside him hangs a small tally board, and at his belt a ring of keys pulls the leather downward with noticeable weight. You nod to him. He nods back. Nods. The kind of nod that says, "Welcome. You are late, and I hope you brought patience." The city beyond the arch sends out layers of sound. A bell from a church tower, a dog barking, then another answering, farther away. A burst of laughter from a tavern that probably smells of ale. Smoke, damp wool, and decisions regretted tomorrow. Iron rims clatter over cobbles. A woman calls to someone to hurry, a shutter slams. Then the wind sweeps through the gate tunnel, and all those living noises blur into one low murmur, like a sleeping animal turning in straw. You step under the arch, and the temperature changes. Outside, the cold is open and searching. Under stone, it is trapped and heavy. The air smells of wet timber, horse sweat, old smoke, iron, and the sour dampness of many boots. Your shoulders loosen a little, not because you are warm, but because at least the snow is no longer hitting you directly in the face. Standards are lower here. Gratitude comes easily. A fringe little tidbit drifts through your mind as you stamp your feet. Some medieval and early modern communities believed that certain thresholds had protective power, and people might place charms, marks, or odd objects near doors to guard against harm. A gatehouse, being one enormous threshold, collects more superstition than a grandmother's pantry. Scratched symbols, bits of iron, prayers, herbs, maybe even a horseshoe placed with great seriousness and uncertain effectiveness. Does it work? Well, the gate is still standing. Let us give the horseshoe a sleepy little nod and not ask too many questions. The sergeant points you towards the inner side chamber. But first there is work. The cart driver must answer questions. Where has he come from? Whose grain is it? Who expects it? Why so late? The answers arrive in puffs of steam, half swallowed by his scarf. You watch the sergeant listen with one ear and judge with both eyes. A gatekeeper is not merely a doorman with a larger hat. He is part watchman, part tax collector, part neighbourhood gossip archive, part human weather vane for trouble. Historians still argue whether the nightly closing of town gates was more about military defence, economic control, social discipline, or simply the habit of communities that had learned to mistrust darkness. The answer, very helpfully, is probably yes to all of it. Gates defend against armed enemies, but they also manage trade, monitor strangers, and mark the difference between the ordered town and the uncertain road. That boundary matters. Tonight, with snow erasing the fields and the sky pressing low, it matters even more. You help shift a small barrier aside so the cart can pass in before full closure. The oxen step forward slowly, hooves knocking on the frozen ground. The cart creaks through the arch, inches from the stone sides, and the driver ducks as if the gate might lower itself personally onto his head. It does not. Very considerate. When the cart is gone, the sergeant looks out at the road once more. The storm is thickening. The last light is nearly gone. Snow fills the tracks behind you almost as quickly as people make them. The open countryside becomes a pale blur, with hedges fading into banks, and the bridge vanishing at its far end. A rider could still be out there, a pilgrim, a messenger, a thief with an excellent sense of timing, or just nobody, which somehow feels almost as watchful. The order comes to begin closing. You put your shoulder to the first great door. It does not move easily. Of course it does not. Medieval doors are not interested in your modern expectations of convenience. The wood is swollen with damp and cold. Iron groans. Your boots slide, then catch. Another watchman joins, and together you heave. The door swings inward inch by inch, dragging the night with it. Snow swirls through the narrowing gap. The road outside becomes a slice, then a line, then a pale seam. The second door follows. The sound of it closing is deep and final. A wooden thunder that settles into your ribs. Bolts are drawn, chains are set. A bar, thick as a young tree trunk, is lifted into its brackets. The motions are practiced, slow, almost ceremonial, not elegant, not grand, but meaningful behind you. The city exhales into evening before you. The winter road is shut away. For a moment you stand in the archway and listen. On the far side of the doors, the storm touches the timber with soft fists. Snow whispers against iron straps. Wind searches every gap, every crack, every weakness. Inside, the lantern flame trembles, then steadies. The sergeant grunts, satisfied enough, which in his language may be a hymn of joy. You follow him through a low doorway into the gatekeeper's house. The threshold is worn smooth by generations of boots. You duck your head because everyone ducks their head here, even the short people, because medieval architecture enjoys reminding you who is in charge. Warmth seeps out from within, smoky and uneven, carrying the smell of peat, ash, onions, wool, and human closeness. Behind you, the city gate is locked. Ahead of you, a narrow room glows. The storm has found the walls. The night has begun. You step fully into the gatekeeper's house, and the first thing you notice is that the warmth is not everywhere. It waits in patches near the hearth. It wraps itself around your knees and hands with smoky affection near the outer wall. The cold still lives in the stone, patient and smug, pressing through the mortar as if it owns the place, which, frankly, it nearly does. The room is low, narrow, and busier than it has any right to be. A fire burns in a shallow hearth against one wall, its flames bending under the pull of a smoky flue. A small table leans beside it, scarred by knives, bowls, cups, elbows, and probably a century of grumbling. Pegs hold cloaks, caps, leather belts, and a bundle of rushes tied for sweeping. A bench rests under the window slit, where a shutter had been pulled tight against the storm. Straw lies scattered near the doorway to soak up snowmelt from boots, and already it has turned dark and tired. You lower your shoulders, not relaxed exactly, more like cautiously grateful that the wind is outside and you are. For the moment, inside, the storm still makes itself known. It presses against the shutter. It slides down the chimney in sudden gusts and sends smoke curling sideways. It moans through some unseen crack with the mournful drama of someone who has been asked to wait outside after curfew. The house is built into the gate, or tucked directly against it, depending on the town, the century, and the budget of whoever was in charge. Some gatehouses were grand, multi-room structures with chambers above the passage and defensive positions overhead. Others were plain, cramped, practical little spaces, more workplace than home. Yours belongs somewhere in between, stone below. Timber and plaster in upper partitions, cold corners, warm centre, and not a single thing arranged for privacy, if privacy means anything more advanced than turning your back. A mainstream fact settles naturally into the smoke. Medieval gatehouses were often multifunctional spaces. They could serve as guard posts, toll stations, storage rooms, small prisons, administrative points, and sometimes living quarters for keepers or watchmen. A gate is never just a gate, remember. It is a mouth, a lock, an office, a warning sign, and tonight, your slightly draughty bedroom. You move toward the hearth. careful not to trip over a basket of split wood. The fire has eaten the best of the dry pieces already, leaving damp logs to hiss and spit. The smell is sharp and earthy. Smoke clings to the rafters and darkens them until they seem tarred. Your eyes water a little, but you pretend they do not, because everyone here breathes this air daily, and nobody is interested in your delicate modern lungs. Medieval comfort often comes with a side dish of irritation. Warmth, yes. Smoke, also yes. Congratulations, you may choose both. The sergeant sets the lantern on the table. Its light adds a smaller golden circle to the hearth glow, and shadows climb the walls like slow animals. He points upward. You follow his finger to a steep stair or ladder tucked against the wall, leading to the chamber above the gate passage. Up there are the mechanisms, the wall access, perhaps a small watchroom, perhaps sleeping space when the household is crowded. Every board overhead creaks faintly as someone moves above. It is comforting until you remember those boards are all that stand between you and a person stepping through the ceiling. Very medieval. You untie the front of your cloak and it sighs wetly as you pull it off. Snow has melted into the wool along your shoulders. You hang it on a peg, where it joins other garments in a slow, damp, steaming contest. The smell of wet wool fills the room. It is dense, animal, and honest, not unpleasant once you accept it. More like a sheep has written a poem about hardship. The floor under your boots is packed earth in places, perhaps flagged stone near the hearth. Uneven and cold, you stamp lightly to bring feeling back to your toes. On one side of the room sits a chest with iron fittings. On another, a shelf holds bowls, a horn spoon, a wooden cup, a small knife, a candle stub, and a clay pot with something drying inside that might be herbs or might be yesterday's disappointment. The household has arranged itself vertically as much as horizontally. Hooks, shelves, beams, baskets, niches in the wall. When space is scarce, everything climbs. You run your hand along the inner stone. It feels damp even where it looks dry. The blocks are not smooth. They carry chips, tool marks, repairs, patches where mortar has been pushed in by hands long gone. A wall like this stores history without explaining it. Winter cold rests inside it all day, then leaks out all night. In summer, it might keep things cool tonight. It behaves like a smug old uncle who refuses to leave the room. A small shuttered opening faces inward toward the town side. Through it, you hear muffled city life. Not the bright clatter of market day now, but the quieter sounds of closing. Feet on cobbles, a door being barred, a bucket set down, someone coughing, someone laughing once, then being hushed. The city is not asleep yet. It is folding itself away. Inside the gatekeeper's house, every object has a job. The bench is seating, storage, and sometimes bed. The chest is storage table, and symbolic declaration that someone here owns more than a spoon. The table can be used for meals, tallying tolls, mending gear, and receiving complaints from men who believe weather should excuse payment. A rope hangs from a beam. A bundle of keys sits in a shallow bowl beside the lantern. A staff leans in the corner. Not decorative. Nothing here is decorative unless it has already worked very hard at something else first. A quirky little tidbit belongs to this threshold world in some medieval buildings. People made small compass-drawn circles, crosses, or interlaced marks on doorways, beams, or hearth areas. Later scholars sometimes call them apotropaic marks, which is a magnificent term for please keep bad things away from my house. You notice shallow scratches near the doorframe, partly hidden by soot and use. They might be protective symbols, they might be board knife work, they might be both, because humans have always mixed anxiety with doodling. Researchers continue to debate whether many of these marks were truly magical protection. Simple construction guides, devotional signs, or later interpretations placed on ordinary scratches. You However, standing in a storm-shaken gatehouse with numb toes, are in no mood to mock anyone's protective doodles. Let the little circles do their work, let every scratch be a tiny sleepy guard. The sergeant's wife, or perhaps the keeper's wife if he is more formally appointed, moves near the hearth with a practiced economy that makes the room seem larger than it is. She shifts a pot, nudges coals, hangs a wet stocking closer to the heat, and gives you one glance that measures your boots, cloak, manners, and general usefulness. You pass, barely. She gestures to the straw near the door and hands you a rough cloth. Snowmelt is your responsibility. Hospitality has limits. You crouch and wipe at the puddle forming under your boots. The straw scratches your fingers through the cloth. Your back protests. The fire crackles above. The wind knocks at the shutters again. This little task, humble and repetitive, draws you deeper into the life of the house. Before sleep can happen, wetness must be managed. Fire must be fed. Tools must be set where hands can find them in darkness. Doors must be checked. Food must be stretched. Everyone must fit. You glance towards the low doorway you entered through. It is thick, reinforced, and set deep within the wall. Beyond it lies the gate passage, the bolts, the great doors, and the road buried in snow inside this room. The world has shrunk to firelight, wet wool, breathing bodies, and the soft thump of weather. The city wall no longer feels like a public monument, it feels like a rib cage, and you are tucked inside it. The keeper sits on the bench and begins unfastening a leather strap from his wrist. His hands are reddened, cracked, and broad. He does not speak immediately. Silence is common here. But it is not empty. It contains work, listening, habit. He hears things you do not yet know how to hear: the difference between a shutter rattling and a latch lifting, between a horse shifting and someone trying the outer door, between ordinary wind and a shout smothered by snow. You sit near the hearth, close enough to feel heat on one side of your face while the other side remains cool. That is Gatehouse living in one simple sensation, half comfort, half exposure. One cheek toasted, one cheek medieval. The storm thickens outside, the walls hold. The locked gate waits behind you, and above it the rooms continue upward, narrow and watchful, promising colder stairs, darker corners, and a night shaped by stone. The keys wait in their shallow bowl as if they were sleeping animals, heavy, cold, and not entirely friendly. You look at them for a moment before touching them, because even in the soft glow of the fire they carry authority. They are not polished little modern keys made to vanish into a pocket. They are iron things with long shanks, wide teeth, and rings thick enough to bruise your palm. Each one belongs to a door, a bolt, a storage chest, perhaps a wicket gate set into the larger doors, and each one has its own stubborn opinion. The keeper notices your glance and lifts the ring with both hands. The keys knock together, dull and deep. It is the sound of permission being dragged through metal. He places them before you, and the table gives a small complaining creak. You pick up the ring, expecting weight, and still it surprises you. Your wrist dips. The iron is cold through your fingers, even though it has been sitting near the hearth. The largest key is almost the length of your hand. Its bow is worn smooth where generations of gatekeepers have gripped it. You can feel little ridges in the metal, hammer marks, unevenness, proof that it was made by someone with tools, fire, and a practical understanding that beauty is nice but locking the door is better. A medieval town gate depends on layers of security. There are the great leaves of the gate itself, the crossbar, chains, bolts, sometimes a portcullis above, sometimes a smaller pedestrian wicket, sometimes inner and outer doors creating a passage between them. In many towns, the keys to important gates were entrusted to officials or keepers and could carry real civic significance. To hold them is to hold a piece of the town's sleep. You turn one key in your hand, the keeper taps it with a blunt finger and names the lock. His words are simple, but the order matters. Outer wicket, inner door, chain room, toll chest, storage, upper chamber. The names make a map in your head, not of streets and houses, but of barriers. Medieval people live among boundaries more visibly than you do. Town and countryside, guild and outsider, citizen and stranger, curfew and freedom, warmth and weather, paid and unpaid, which is perhaps the most passionately defended boundary of all. Beside the keys sits a tally stick, notched along one side. It looks like nothing sounds special, a sliver of wood with cuts in it. But it represents memory made physical. Not everyone keeps written accounts in neat ink, and not every transaction deserves parchment. A notch can record a load, a payment, a debt, a promise that someone will absolutely deny next week. Wooden tallies were widely used in medieval Europe for accounting, and in England the Exchequer famously used split tally sticks for royal finance for centuries. Very glamorous. Imagine running a kingdom on carved sticks and confidence. The keeper shows you the smaller toll chest beneath the table. It has iron bands and a lock that seems determined to outlive every person in the room. Inside are coins, tokens, scraps of record, maybe sealed notes, and perhaps a private arrangement or two. Town gates often collected tolls or customs on goods entering for sale: grain, wool, fish, wine, firewood, livestock, and all the other things a city eats, burns, wears, drinks, and complains about had to pass through controlled points. The gate is a funnel. The town wants what comes through. It also wants to count it. Your fingers rest on the chest lid. The wood is smooth at the edges but rough near the hinges. You smell iron, damp boards, ash, and the faint sour tang of old coinage handled by too many cold hands. Medieval money is not abstract here. It is weight, clink, suspicion, and argument. No one taps a card and wanders off into the snow. Every payment requires eye contact, memory, and the awkward possibility of someone insisting that last year the toll was lower. The keeper's wife sets a cup near you, and the liquid inside is weak ale, small beer, or something safely warm enough to feel kind. You take it in both hands. The cup is wooden, and the rim is worn soft. It tastes malty, thin, a little smoky, and deeply believable. Water in towns could be safe or unsafe depending on place and source, so low-alcohol drinks were common parts of daily life in many medieval communities. Though people certainly drank water too when it was available and trusted, the past, inconveniently, refuses to fit into one tidy myth. Rude of it, really. A knock comes at the inner shutter, not from the storm side, but from the town passage. The keeper rises without hurry. This is not panic. This is routine. A young servant from a nearby household stands just beyond the door, cheeks pink from cold, sent to ask whether the last cart from the mill has come through. The keeper answers yes, and the servant hands over a small message in return, folded and sealed with a bit of wax that has cracked at the edge. The keeper does not open it at once. He tucks it near the tally board. You are beginning to understand that the gatehouse is not simply a defensive post after dark. It is an information point. News sticks to it like snow to wool. Who arrived late? Whose horse went lame? Which merchant argued? Which priest passed through with a sealed letter? Which stranger had no convincing business? Which cart carried more barrels than declared? A gatekeeper may not be rich, but he hears things. A quirky tidbit circles back as you watch the keeper test the keyring against his belt hook, in some places and periods. Ceremonial town keys became symbols offered to honoured visitors, rulers, or saints' processions. The idea of giving someone the key to the city has roots in real fortified urban life, where access meant trust, of course. Tonight the actual key to the cities smells of iron and wet leather, and would ruin the line of a fancy outfit. Symbolism is tidier after someone else cleans it. Specialists still disagree about how much independence ordinary gatekeepers had in deciding late entry. and how much they merely enforced orders from civic officials, lords, or councils, records survive unevenly, and daily judgment often disappears from written history. A rule might say the gate closes at curfew, a storm, a pregnant woman, a known merchant, or a messenger with a lord's seal might complicate that rule. Human beings, annoyingly, keep happening. The keeper takes you back into the passage for the first round of checking. The warmth falls away as soon as you enter the arch. The air here is colder, smelling of wet timber and old stone. Your breath shows white. The lantern throws a trembling circle across the great doors. The bar rests in its brackets, thick and dark, its surface polished where hands have lifted it for years. The keeper makes you touch each part in order. Bar seated, chain looped, bolt drawn, wicket locked, iron pin set. You repeat the motions, not because he doubts the door, but because tired people forget things, and forgetting at a gate can become everyone's problem. The wicket is the smaller door set inside the larger leaf, large enough for a person to pass without opening the entire gate. You bend close to its lock, fit the key, and turn. The mechanism resists, then gives with a heavy inner click. It is deeply satisfying, in the way only old locks can be. Modern locks whisper. This one announces the decision. You check the seam between the doors. Snow has pushed through in a fine white line near the bottom, already melting where it touches the darker inner wood. The wind presses from the far side, making the boards flex almost imperceptibly. Beyond them, the road is now invisible, yet you feel it there. The emptiness beyond the gate has texture. It contains fields, hedges, frozen ruts. Perhaps someone hurrying and hoping. The closed gate is protection, but it is also refusal. Back inside, you help hang the keys on a peg close to the keeper's sleeping place, not by the outer door where a clever hand might find them, and not too near the fire where heat and habit may damage leather and temper. Everything has a position learned by repetition. The staff by the wall, lantern near the table, keys within reach, toll chest under supervision, knife at the belt, bowl by the hearth. Life becomes safer when objects return to their proper places. The keeper's wife murmurs a phrase before placing an iron poker across the hearth edge. It may be habit, prayer, or a small protective act. Iron was often credited in folklore with the power to repel harmful forces, especially things imagined as unnatural or troublesome. You remember the scratched circles near the doorway, the possible charm marks, the horseshoe you decided not to question. The whole gatehouse seems stitched with practical magic and magical practicality. Lock the door, say the prayer, count the coins, bank the fire. Why choose only one defence? You sit again, and the keys glimmer on their peg. Their shadows stretch long over the wall, like thin black branches. Outside, the storm pours at the barred gate. Inside, the small routines of custody settle around you. Iron, wood, custom, trust, suspicion, and sleep all hang from that ring. Soon the hearth will claim your attention again because frozen boots and wet wool are beginning to steam, and comfort, such as it is, must be coaxed into the room one damp layer at a time. You return to the hearth because your boots have begun making that unpleasant soft sound of leather surrendering to winter. Every step gives a faint squelch, a private little announcement that snow has found its way through seams, stitching and optimism. You sit on the low bench nearest the fire and stretch 1 foot forward, careful not to place it too close. Leather can crack, shrink, stiffen, or warp if dried too fiercely. Medieval people know this through sad experience, which is usually the most persuasive teacher. The keeper's wife notices your clumsy angle and nudges your boot back with the end of a stick. "Slow," she says. That is all. A complete lecture, very efficient. So you dry slowly. Steam rises from your wool hose. It smells of sheep, mud, smoke, and the long road. The firelight catches the moisture in tiny wavering ribbons. Your toes throb as feeling returns. That peculiar ache of warmth, finding cold flesh again. Not pain exactly, but a reminder from your feet that they have been loyal and would like better management in future. The hearth is the heart of the room, but it is not a fireplace in the modern, neat, decorative sense. It is work. It cooks, warms, dries, smokes, lights, and threatens. A pot hangs from an iron hook over the coals. Ash is banked along one side. Charred wood leans inward, glowing at its cracks. Small flames lick at the damp logs and hiss as trapped water escapes. A fire in a winter gatehouse is not background ambience, it is technology, comfort, danger, and employment all at once. In many medieval households, especially modest ones, the hearth was central to daily survival. It provided heat and cooking, but also filled rooms with smoke when chimneys, flues, or ventilation were poor or imperfect. The blackened rafters above you are not a stylistic choice. They are a record of thousands of evenings like this. Thousands of pot socks, quarrels, soups, coughs, and tired people leaning toward warmth. You place your hands near the fire, palms out, then turn them slowly. The skin across your knuckles is red and rough. The keeper's hands are worse. So are his wife's. Everyone here carries winter on the body. Chapped lips, split fingertips, damp hems, a permanent relationship with smoke. You're beginning to understand that comfort in this house is never total. It arrives in pieces. One warm hand, one dry sleeve, one cup that does not freeze in your fingers, one bench where you can sit without being directly snowed upon. Luxury, apparently. Your boots come off with resistance. The first heel sticks, then releases with a damp sigh. The second requires both hands and a humiliating little wriggle. You set them near, but not too near. The hearth. The soles are caked with half-frozen mud from the road outside the wall. Straw clings to the edges. Someone has placed small wooden pegs and a rack beside the fire for drying things, though the rack is already crowded with stockings, mittens, a child's hood, a patched sleeve, and a leather strap. The gatehouse has no room for useless air. Even empty space is put to work. Your toes, wrapped in wool, face the fire like worshippers. The keeper's wife shakes out your cloak and hangs it from a peg where heat may reach it indirectly. She presses the wool between thumb and fingers, judging wetness by feel. The garment is heavy now. Wool can hold a great deal of water, yet still insulate better than many fabrics when damp. That is one of the reasons it mattered so much across medieval Europe. Sheep were not just adorable clouds with legs. They were warmth, trade, rent, status, blankets, cloaks, and occasionally dinner. Though one suspects the sheep preferred the textile career path. A small boy, perhaps a son, nephew, or apprentice, crouches near the wood basket and sorts kindling. He knows which pieces are driest by touch and sound. He knocks 2 twigs together, listens, and sets one aside. The better pieces make a sharper note. The damp ones answer dully. You watch this tiny expertise and feel modern life receding a little. Here, knowing wood is not rustic charm. It is the difference between smoke and flame, between a night that can be endured and a night that becomes a wet, coughing argument. Outside, the storm throws snow against the shutter. It lands in soft ticks, then rattles when wind drives icy grains into the wood. Every so often a stronger gust moves through the gate passage and makes the whole structure murmur. The great doors beyond the room are shut, barred, and chained, yet you feel the weather lean on them. It is strange to be safe and not safe at the same time. The gatehouse shelters you precisely because it stands where danger meets the town. A minor but memorable custom comes to mind as you watch the wet footwear gather by the hearth. People sometimes tucked dried grasses, rushes, or straw onto floors to absorb damp and filth, especially in busy rooms. In higher status settings, this could become quite elaborate, with scented herbs mixed in. In a gatekeeper's house, it is less romantic. The straw near the door is doing brave work against mud, snowmelt, and whatever the oxen contributed earlier. No lavender fantasy tonight, just practical floor salad. Some historians question how clean or filthy medieval domestic floors really were across different classes and regions, because literary complaints, archaeological evidence, and household accounts do not always tell the same story. A wealthy hall with fresh rushes is not the same as a cramped working gatehouse in a storm. The past keeps refusing to be either perfectly disgusting or charmingly quaint. Very inconsiderate for anyone trying to make a simple documentary. The keeper sits with one boot off and one still on, massaging his toes through a woolen wrapping. He does it without drama, as if pain is an old neighbour. His belt lies beside him, but the keys remain close, even relaxing. He does not fully unfasten himself from duty. The ring is within arm's reach, catching firelight now and then. The toll chest sits under the table. The staff leans in its corner. The door is visible from the hearth. A gatekeeper rests facing responsibility. A drip begins from your cloak onto the straw below. Tap, tap, tap. It is a small sound, but in the room it joins everything else. Fire crackle, pot simmer, wind press. Boot leather tightening as it dries. Someone breathing through a stuffy nose. The muted city beyond the wall. The house is an instrument played by winters. The smell of supper is beginning to thicken. Onions, or perhaps leeks, soften in the pot with peas, beans or grains. Something fatty has been added. Not much, just enough to leave a sheen and make the room lean toward it. Hunger wakes in you slowly. Cold often hides hunger until warmth returns, and then your stomach remembers its legal rights. You cup your hands around the wooden drink again. It has cooled slightly. The surface reflects the fire in broken amber. You sip, and the taste is mild, faintly sour. Welcome! The keeper's wife adds a pinch of something dried to the pot and stirs. No one asks if you have dietary preferences. The medieval menu offers 2 options: grateful and still hungry. A cat appears from beneath the bench, silent as a drifting scrap of shadow. It pauses near your boot, sniffs, decides you are not food, and moves closer to the hearth with professional confidence. Its fur is patched with soot along one flank. It settles where the warmth is best, occupying a position that no human seems willing to challenge, even in a gatehouse. Some authorities outrank the keeper. The boy tosses a sliver of wood onto the coals. Sparks rise, brief and golden, then vanish into the smoky dark above. Your eyelids lower for half a breath. The warmth on your face is becoming heavy. The room presses close, not unpleasantly now. Stone, timber, bodies, cloth, steam, and fire gather into one dim shelter. Then the wind strikes the outer gate hard enough to make the chains answer. Everyone looks up, not in panic, not yet, just listening. The keeper pauses with his hand still around his foot. His wife stops stirring. The boy freezes with another twig in hand. The cat opens one eye, which may be the most serious reaction in the room. The sound fades. Only wind, only snow, only the night testing the work of human hands. Slowly, the room resumes. The pot stirs. The twig falls onto the fire. Your cloak drips. Your socks steam. The keeper grunts, and the cat closes its eye again, having judged the threat beneath its concern. You breathe out. The frozen leather of your boots begins to soften near the hearth, and the cold road outside feels farther away. Though not gone, it waits beyond the sealed timber, beyond the ditch, beyond the whitening bridge. But here, in this narrow room inside the city wall, you learn the first rule of winter sleep before you can rest. You must dry. The pot begins to speak more confidently now. giving soft, thick sounds as supper rolls beneath the surface. The keeper's wife lifts the lid with a cloth wrapped around her hand and steam rises into the smoky air, carrying the scent of onions, peas, barley, and something salty enough to make your mouth remember it has a purpose. The room changes at once. Even the boy sorting kindling sits up straighter. The cat, who's been pretending not to care about human affairs, opens both eyes and becomes deeply political. You shift your feet, still wrapped in drying wool, and pull the bench a little closer to the table. Not too close, because the table is already crowded with cups, a knife, a heel of bread, the lantern, a small dish of salt, the tally stick, and the keeper's elbow, which has claimed a territory of its own. The gatehouse does not expand for mealtimes. People fold themselves around the available surfaces and make peace with knees knocking under the table. Your boots remain near the hearth, slowly releasing the smell of road, leather, and damp straw. Your cloak drips less now. Your face has warmed, but your back still knows where the wall is. Behind you, stone holds the day's cold like a grudge. In front of you, the fire glows low and steady. This is the balance of the evening, and perhaps of medieval winter itself. Turn one way and you are comforted. Turn the other and you are reminded not to get proud. Bowls are passed around, wooden, horn, or coarse pottery, each with chips, stains, and long use in its rim. You receive yours in both hands. It is hot enough to sting your palms through the bowl, and you welcome the sting. The pottage is thick, humble, and honest. A spoonful gives you softened peas or beans, barley swollen with broth, bits of leek, perhaps a scrap of bacon or salted pork if the household is fortunate tonight. More likely the flavour comes from a bone used many times before it's allowed to retire from service. Medieval thrift is not a lifestyle brand. It is survival with bookkeeping. Pottage, in one form or another, was a daily staple for many people in medieval Europe. It could be thin or thick, plain or enriched, depending on season, wealth, region, and luck. Bread was just as central, often making up a large share of daily calories. You tear a piece from the loaf set on the table, its crust hard, its inside coarse and dark. This is not delicate white bread from a glass-front bakery. This is working bread, dense with rye, barley, maslin, or whatever grain the household can afford. It asks to be chewed, it wins. You dip the bread into the pottage and let it soften. The first bite is almost painfully good. Not because it is rich. It is not. It is good because you are cold, tired, and wet, and the food is warm. Hunger does not require luxury to feel grateful. The taste is earthy, smoky, slightly sour from the bread, faintly sweet from the onions. You swallow and feel heat travel down into your chest. The keeper eats without hurry but without waste. He scrapes the side of his bowl clean after every few spoonfuls. His wife watches everyone's portions, not with stinginess, but with calculation. There must be enough for the household. Perhaps someone coming off watch later. Perhaps a child who wakes hungry. Perhaps breakfast if the storm delays supplies. Food is not simply food in this room. It is planning. Outside, a bell begins to ring. It comes from within the city, softened by walls, snow, and distance. Slow, measured. Each note seems to drop through the evening like a stone lowered into dark water. Conversation pauses. The boy counts under his breath, perhaps by habit. The keeper tilts his head, confirming what he already knows. Curfew. The word comes from old roots meaning to cover the fire, and in many medieval towns and cities, evening bells signalled that fires should be banked or guarded. Movement reduced. Taverns watched, and gates closed or soon to be closed. The exact rules varied from place to place, but the sound mattered. It told a community to settle, secure, and be sensible. Naturally, not everyone obeyed. Not. Humans have always treated sensible instructions as opening suggestions. The curfew bell changes the taste of the room. Supper becomes quieter, more inward. The city beyond the wall is no longer simply busy. It is being gathered into order. Fires are covered, shutters latched, animals tied, children pulled indoors, apprentices told to stop lingering in lanes unless they want trouble, and possibly even if they do, the night belongs to watchmen now, and to those with urgent reasons, bad habits, or excellent excuses. A small dish of salt is placed where all can reach it. You take only a pinch. Salt is ordinary and precious at once, used for flavour and preservation. Taxed and traded across long distances in many regions, it brightens the pottage immediately. The keeper's wife notices your restraint and nods almost invisibly. You have not behaved like someone born in a palace. Good. The room may allow you to continue existing. A small odd custom flickers through the conversation when the boy complains that his spoon has a crack. The keeper laughs and says a crack spoon lets the devil lick first, which makes the boy roll his eyes in the grand ancient tradition of children unimpressed by adult folklore. Household objects often gathered sayings, warnings, and little superstitions around them. A spilled salt dish, bread laid upside down, a knife passed wrongly, a shoe placed near the hearth in the wrong way. Were all these beliefs taken with solemn terror? Probably not. Some were jokes, some habits, some half-believed protections, and some the medieval version of don't tempt fate, which remains popular because fate has poor customer service. Modern researchers are not fully agreed on how deeply ordinary people believed every domestic omen recorded in sermons, charms, and later folklore collections. A priest's complaint about superstition does not always prove what a family whispered over supper. A joke told at a smoky table can look very serious when written down by someone with ink authority and no sense of timing. The keeper's wife pours another small measure of ale into your cup. It is weak, cloudy, and slightly warm from the room. You drink it slowly. Ale and beer were commonly consumed across medieval northern Europe, brewed at home or bought, though strength varied widely in towns. Brewing could be domestic work, commercial work, regulated work, and very often women's work, especially in earlier periods. The smell of malt seems to belong to the city as much as smoke and damp wool. A neighbour appears briefly at the inner door, not entering fully, just leaning in with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how far hospitality stretches during supper. She brings news from 2 lanes over, a chimney smoking badly, a lost pig found in a yard, a quarrel at the baker's door, and someone claiming a peddler is stuck outside the north gate. The keeper frowns at that last detail but does not rise. The north gate is someone else's burden tonight. This is the sweet music of civic organisation. Your problem has an official location, and thankfully it is not here. Still, the story lingers. A peddler outside in this weather. You imagine a figure hunched under a pack, stamping feet beyond some other locked arch, bargaining with a watchman whose sympathy may or may not survive the cold. The city protects itself by closing, but every closure creates an outside. Every warm bowl inside has a shadow on the road. You take another spoonful. The conversation drifts, low and practical. Grain prices, frozen wells, a rumour of wolves nearer the woods than usual, a complaint about the miller's measure. The boy asks whether snow on the roof will collapse the shed behind the tower. The keeper says not if someone remembers to clear it. Everyone looks at the boy. The boy suddenly becomes fascinated by his bowl. The curfew bell finishes. Its last note fades into the rafters and disappears behind the hiss of the fire. The city seems quieter already, though perhaps you are simply listening differently. The gatehouse holds its supper close. Bowls are scraped. Bread crusts soften in broth. The cat receives nothing officially, then somehow obtains a tiny scrap from beneath the table. Medieval justice is mysterious. When your bowl is nearly empty, you feel sleep approach in the distance, not near enough to claim you, but near enough to soften the edges of thought. Warm food sits heavily in your stomach. Your toes no longer ache. Your damp sleeves have begun to dry stiffly. Smoke folds itself into your hair and clothes until you cannot separate your own smell from the room's. The keeper rises and takes the lantern. Supper is not the end of duty, it is only a pause with spoons. He glances toward the Sate passage. The curfew has rung, the doors are barred. The city is closing its eyes. But beyond the timber, beyond the ditch, beyond the whitening road, there may still be voices coming through the storm, asking to be heard. The keeper lifts the lantern, and the small flame leans as he opens the door into the gate passage. Cold steps in at once, not politely, not gradually, but with the confidence of a creditor. It slides around your ankles, under the hem of your tunic, across the drying wool at your knees. You follow him because the warm meal in your stomach has made you brave, or possibly foolish. In medieval winter, those two qualities often wear the same hat. The passage under the gate is almost dark except for the lantern and a thin grey line where snow is pressed beneath the great doors. The bar sits in its brackets, the chains hang steady, the bolts are drawn, everything is as you left it. But the place feels different after curfew. Before, the arch was a busy throat through which people, carts, animals, and gossip moved. Now it is sealed. Now it listens. You hear the storm first, wind pushes against the outer doors in long breaths. Snow taps the timber with tiny hard fingers. Somewhere above, something loose knocks against stone, then pauses, then knocks again. The keeper raises one hand, not for silence exactly, but for attention. You stop breathing for a moment, which is dramatic and not especially useful. There it is, a voice outside, muffled, thin, nearly swallowed by weather. The keeper does not rush. He sets the lantern on a hook near the side wall and bends toward a narrow speaking hatch. A small covered opening built to let those inside communicate without opening the gate. Not every gate has one exactly like this, but some form of guarded communication is sensible when a closed door is the only thing between a town and the unknown. The keeper slides back a small wooden cover, and wind immediately spits snow through the gap. "Name," he calls. The answer comes broken by gusts, a man's name, then a place, then a plea. "He's late," he says. Of course he's late. Everyone outside a locked gate is late. He has been delayed by the storm. A lame mule, a drifted lane, the astonishing unfairness of weather, and perhaps one or two choices he does not mention. His words arrive in pieces. He asks to come in, the keeper asks his business. The man says he carries cloth samples for a merchant near the Bridge Street. He gives the merchant's name. That matters. Names are passwords in a world where paper is scarce, travel is slow, and personal reputation can open doors that coin alone cannot. The keeper glances back at you, then toward the inner doorway where his wife now stands with her arms folded. She knows the merchant, or knows of him. That's nearly as useful. In many medieval towns, strangers entering after dark could be treated with caution. Urban authorities often regulated lodging, trading, and movement, especially during curfew hours. Inns, hosts, and householders might be responsible for the behaviour of guests. It was not simply paranoia. Towns were vulnerable to fire, theft, disease, espionage, smuggling, and plain old disorder, humanity's most reliable export. The man outside coughs and asks again. You can imagine him easily now. Hood crusted with snow, pack biting into his shoulders, fingers stiff around a mule's rope. He may be honest, he may also be exactly the kind of person an honest man would pretend to be. The gatekeeper has to decide with limited information, bad weather, and the knowledge that anyone he admits becomes the town's concern. A second voice interrupts from beyond the gate. Higher and angrier, another traveller, perhaps a woman, perhaps a young man. You cannot tell. This one says the first has been blocking the road and talking too much, even in a snowstorm. People find a cue and immediately develop opinions about it. The keeper closes the hatch for a moment. The sudden silence feels thick. He looks at his wife. She gives the smallest shrug, which somehow contains legal theory, weather assessment, moral hesitation, and marital fatigue. The keeper rubs his jaw. The boy has crept behind you, pretending he is not listening with his whole face. A less famous detail of gate life appears in the keeper's decision. Some towns used watchmen and porters not only to guard walls but to identify residents, regular traders, and suspicious newcomers by memory. In a smaller city, the gate could be a human database, not flawless, obviously, more like a damp, judgmental database wearing wool. The keeper slides the hatch open again. He asks the name of the merchant's wife. The man outside hesitates only half a breath, then answers. The keeper asks what colour sign hangs above the merchant's door. The man answers, red shears on a whiteboard. The keeper looks to his wife. She nods. The decision is not to open the whole gate. Absolutely not. That would be madness dressed as hospitality. Instead, the keeper orders the man to come alone to the wicket when called, leaving mule and pack outside until inspected. The man protests, then hears something in the keeper's silence and becomes more agreeable. You help lift a smaller interior bar from the wicket. The keeper takes the proper key from his belt and fits it into the lock. The iron turns with that heavy click you are beginning to recognize in your bones. The little door opens inward, just wide enough for a body, and winter pours through like it has been waiting all evening to make a dramatic entrance. A figure stumbles in, bent nearly double, wrapped in brown wool-crusted white. Snow clings to his eyelashes and beard. His cheeks are raw. He smells of cold air, wet leather, and mule. Behind him, the animal snorts outside, insulted by the delay. The second traveller calls something you cannot make out, except that it contains the tone of someone preparing a complaint for future use. The keeper keeps one hand on the door and the other near his staff. The man lowers his hood. His eyes blink in the lantern light. He gives the merchant's name again, adds that he has been before, and says that St. Martin himself could not have walked faster in this storm, which is a bold claim involving a saint who cannot conveniently contradict him. Saints often threaded through medieval speech, timekeeping, and ordinary habit. Feast days marked calendars, work rhythms, rents, fares, and memory. To say something happened near a saint's day, or swear by a saint, could place daily life inside the sacred year. It also made complaints sound more impressive, which is never wasted effort. The keeper searches the man's sleeves. Cloak, belt, and pouch with brisk practicality. Nothing theatrical, no villainous dagger appears, only a small eating knife. A wax tablet, a few coins, and fingers so cold they shake. The cloth samples are brought in next after inspection through the partly opened wicket. The mule remains outside beneath the arch, snorting visible clouds. You feel sorry for it? The mule probably feels sorry for everyone. Then comes the second traveller, who turns out to be a woman with a basket tied in oilcloth and a temper sturdy enough to survive winter. She is from a village just beyond the fields and has come to stay with her sister because the storm is flooding the lower lane with snowdrifts. She names the sister. The keeper's wife knows that family too, and this time it is she who speaks first. Let her in. The wicket opens again. The woman steps through, bringing the smell of wet reeds, cold wool, and whatever is in the basket. Perhaps eggs, perhaps cheese, perhaps something alive that has wisely chosen silence. She glares at the cloth man as though he personally designed the weather. He avoids her eyes. Civilization has resumed. One old belief murmured in places like this is that the first person admitted after a closing or at certain thresholds could bring luck or ill luck into a household or town. Whether anyone here thinks that tonight is another matter. The keeper would probably say luck is best improved by checking sleeves for knives and making sure tolls are paid. Still, the woman crosses herself as she enters the passage. The cloth man does the same a moment later, perhaps not to be outperformed spiritually. Among historians of urban life, there remains disagreement about how often curfew rules bent in practice, and whether surviving ordinances reflect daily reality or official wishes. A regulation may sound strict in a town book. A freezing traveller at a hatch is where strictness meets breath, names, weather, and the keeper's mood. The latecomers are not simply released into the city. The clothman must go to the named merchant, and the keeper sends the boy to wake a runner from the inner lane to confirm the household will receive him. The woman waits while the keeper's wife wraps her hands around a cup for a moment. Not kindness advertised, just kindness performed. A sister's house lies only a short walk away. But after curfew, even short walks have rules. Someone will escort her. The wicket is closed again. Bolt, key, bar, chain. Each sound returns order to the passage. The man, the woman, the mule, the basket, the cloth, the questions, the irritation, the mercy. All of it has passed through the narrow judgment of the gate and become part of the city's night. Outside, the road is once again hidden by snow. Inside, the lantern flame steadies. You stand in the cold passage, feeling the warmth of supper fading from your hands, and you understand that a gatekeeper sleeps lightly because the world does not stop at a locked door. It gathers there. It knocks. It explains itself badly. It asks to be believed. The keeper pulls the speaking hatch shut, and the storm loses its voice for now. The keeper does not return straight to the hearth. Of course he does not. Warmth has barely touched your knees again before duty reaches out one cold finger and beckons. He takes the lantern, checks the little shutter over the flame, and nods toward the stairs. You follow, because this is how the night teaches you its shape. One uncomfortable ascent at a time. The stair is steep, narrow, and built by someone who clearly believed feet were smaller in the past. Perhaps they were. Perhaps people simply complained less in writing. You climb with one hand on the wall, feeling rough stone scrape your fingertips. The cold grows sharper with each step. Warm smoke from below follows a little way, then gives up. Above you waits the upper gate chamber, where the house becomes less household and more watchpost. The boards creak under your weight. A slit window looks out over the road, though tonight there is almost nothing to see except snow moving through darkness. The lantern shows coils of rope, a spare length of chain, stacked poles, a covered barrel, and a heap of old sacking. The room smells of dust, iron, mice, and frozen timber. It is not quite outside, but it has been negotiating with outside all day and losing. The keeper raises the lantern toward the roof beams. He checks for leaks. A dark patch near one joint glistens, but only faintly. He grunts. This seems to mean the roof is disappointing, but not yet treasonous. You continue upward through a small door onto the wall walk. The wind strikes at once, flattening your breath back into your mouth. Snow whirls in the lantern light like pale insects. The city wall stretches away into gloom, its parapet capped with white. Behind you, the town lies low and dark, roofs hunched together under snow, chimney smoke torn sideways, windows shuttered, lanes fading into shadow. Ahead, outside the wall, the world is emptier. Fields, road, ditch, hedges, all blurred into one restless whiteness. You pull your hood tight. The keeper begins walking along the wall walk, slow and practiced. You copy his steps. The stones underfoot are slick in places, crusted in others, and uneven everywhere. A fall here would be embarrassing, painful, and historically authentic in the least desirable way. The parapet gives some shelter, but the wind comes around corners, through gaps, over the top, under the hood, and into your private thoughts. Medieval towns commonly organise night watches, especially where walls, gates, and fire risk demanded regular attention. The details differed from place to place. Some watchmen were paid. Some citizens were obligated to serve in rotation, and some arrangements mix professional and civic duty. On a night like this, The theory of communal responsibility becomes a man with a lantern and cold ears walking the stones, while everyone else pretends to be asleep. The keeper pauses at the first angle in the wall. He listens. You listen too. At first you hear only weather. Then gradually, the city separates itself into layers. A church bell shifts faintly in the wind, not ringing now, just moving on its frame with a small metal sigh. A dog barks twice in a yard below, then thinks better of public speaking. Somewhere a door latch rattles and stops. From a lane near the inner market comes the dull clop of hooves, likely a patrol horse or someone escorting those late arrivals from the gate. Farther off, a baby cries, then is hushed. Smoke hangs low between roofs, carrying the smell of wood, peat, and supper fires being banked for the night. The keeper points toward a roofline below. You see nothing. Then he lowers the lantern shade, and in the darker moment you catch it, a faint red glow where perhaps a shutter is not fully closed or a household fire has been left too lively. Fire is one of the great terrors of crowded medieval towns. Timber buildings, thatch in some places, open flames, narrow lanes, stored hay, rushes, tallow candles, and people who are tired, a wonderful combination. If your goal is disaster, the keeper mutters that someone will be warned, not now, unless the glow grows. Waking half the lane in a snowstorm is not done lightly. Still, he marks the place in memory. This is another kind of locking up. Gates keep danger from entering. Watchmen watch what might already be inside. You walk on. The lantern flame jumps under its cover. Your breath comes in little white clouds. The wool at your shoulders grows stiff where melted snow has refrozen. Your fingers, warmed earlier around a bowl, begin to lose their confidence. You tuck them under your arms when the keeper stops again, at a narrow tower stair. Another watchman emerges, hunched beneath a hood, carrying a staff and looking as pleased with the weather as a wet rooster. He and the keeper exchange a few quiet words. The eastern stretch is clear. No shout from the river gate, no sign of trouble near the ditch, one loose coping stone near the corner, to be checked by daylight. This is not glamorous intelligence. It's exactly the sort that keeps walls standing and bodies indoors. A curious little habit appears when the other watchman taps the stone parapet twice before turning back. The keeper does not comment. Maybe it is a signal, maybe a personal ritual, maybe a half-superstitious knock to keep misfortune asleep. People who work dangerous or lonely night jobs often collect gestures like this. Sailors, shepherds, watchmen, guards tap the stone, touch the charm, say the phrase, not because you're foolish, but because night is large and small acts give the hand something to believe. There is no easy agreement among researchers about how to separate practical routine from belief in medieval protective habits. A gesture might be religious, magical, professional, playful, or simply inherited from someone older who said, "Do it like this," and never explained why. The past does not come with tidy labels pinned to every action. It leaves us with scratches near doorways, taps on stone, prayers in margins, and people trying to feel safer. The keeper leads you toward the tower above the gate. From here, the road outside is directly below, though still mostly invisible. Snow has smoothed the bridge into a pale strip. The ditch is a soft hollow. The great doors stand beneath your feet, their iron straps black against the white gathering at the threshold. You think of the cloth cellar, the angry village woman, the mule steaming outside, then vanishing inward through the wicket. Their footprints are probably gone already. On the town side, the lane leading from the gate bends between tightly packed houses. Upper stories lean toward one another in places, close enough to make the sky a narrow ribbon. In warmer weather, this lane would smell of bread, dung, ale, fish, leather, sweat, herbs, sewage, flowers from a window box if someone was optimistic, and perhaps all at once. Tonight the snow softens everything. It covers refuse, muffles wheels, rounds sharp edges, and gives even the most suspicious alley a gentle face. Snow is a talented liar. You stand there long enough for the cold to move through your soles into your bones. The keeper seems carved from the wall itself. He scans the road, the ditch, the bridge, the roofs, the smoke. His calm is not dreamy. It is trained attention. You begin to understand why sleep in the gatehouse must come in shallow pools rather than deep rivers. The body rests, the ears continue their watch. He tells you to look at the snow near the outer side of the ditch. At first it is just white, then you see a darker mark, perhaps a branch, perhaps tracks. You lean forward. He stops you with one hand on your sleeve. No need to fall over curiosity. The mark does not move. It is likely a torn bundle of brush or a drift against a stone. Still, he watches it for several breaths. Only then does he turn away. The wind eases slightly as you return along the wall walk, and in that small pause the city behind you seems to breathe. Hundreds of sleeping bodies under timber and tile, bakers waiting for the hour before dawn, a priest perhaps awake at prayers, a mother feeding a child, a thief reconsidering the weather, somewhere. Embers glow beneath ash, somewhere. A person dreams of spring. The stare down feels warmer before it is warm. The smell of smoke rises to meet you. Your feet find the cramped steps, one at a time, and the lantern paints the walls gold. Below, the gatehouse room waits with its pot, its drying boots, its straw by the door, its watchful cat, and its crowded little Mercy. But the sound of the wall walk stays with you, that long hush of snow over stone, and the keeper's slow steps measuring the edge of the sleeping town. Back below the wall walk, the gatehouse room receives you like a low, smoky nest, not a clean nest, not a poetic nest. More the sort of nest built by tired people with damp socks and limited floor space, but still, after the wall above, it feels almost tender. The heat touches your face first, then the smells return. Ash, pottage, wet wool, leather, old straw warm bodies, and the faint sharpness of the cat who has taken possession of the best patch near the hearth as if appointed by royal charter. Your hands ache as they thaw. You rub them together and feel the sting come back into your fingers. The keeper hangs the lantern again, shrugs snow from his shoulders, and bends toward the hearth without speaking. His silence now is not stern. It is the silence of someone saving words because the night may demand them later. Then, from beyond the inner doorway, comes a sound like a disgruntled bellows, the mule. You had nearly forgotten the cloth seller's mule, which is unfair, since the mule has forgotten nothing and forgiven less. The animal stands under partial shelter beside the gate passage, where a lean-to or small stable space has been arranged against the inner wall. It is not luxurious. Nothing here is luxurious, but it is out of the worst of the snow, and in medieval terms that almost qualifies as a spa. The keeper nods for you to come along. You follow him through the door, your stockinged feet shoved awkwardly into half-dried boots. They are warmer than before, but still damp enough to remind you that improvement is not the same as success. The stable corner smells stronger than the house, though not unpleasantly if you surrender to it. Hay, dung, steam, hide, old harness, damp wood, and the deep grassy warmth of animals. The mule stands with ears angled backward, eyes shining in the lantern light. Its pack has been removed and set on a dry board. A rough blanket lies over its back. Snow melts from its legs and drips into the straw. Animals are not background decoration in this world. They are labour, transport, warning system, food sources, wealth, companionship, and sometimes chaos with hooves. A town gate sees horses, oxen, donkeys, mules, pigs, geese, dogs, and the occasional creature that has absolutely no interest in civic order. Pack animals helped carry goods into medieval towns every day, and roads in winter could make even a short journey slow, expensive and miserable as the mule's mood, therefore, is historically justified. You take a bundle of hay from the keeper and place it in the manger. The mule lowers its head with a suspicious glance, then begins eating as if it was planning to do so all along, and your involvement was unnecessary. Its breath warms the wood. You hear the wet grinding of teeth and the rustle of hay stems. The sound is oddly calming, steady and domestic, like a second hearth with ears. A dog lies curled in the corner, almost invisible until it lifts its head. It is lean, rough-coated, and old enough to know that barking wastes heat unless there is a very good reason. One eye catches the lantern. Its tail thumps once, not for you personally, but in recognition of events. Gatehouses often kept the dogs or benefited from nearby dogs, not always in any formal sense. They warned, and scavenged, guarded, followed, and inserted themselves into human arrangements with the confidence of creatures who had discovered people were useful. The keeper scratches the dog behind the ear. The dog accepts this as tribute. Near the stable wall, a few hens mutter in a small crate, feathers puffed against the cold. They have been brought in from somewhere less sheltered. Perhaps because the storm became too hard, their smell is dry, dusty, and faintly sour. One opens an eye and delivers a tiny offended cluck. Chickens, like cats, seem to believe weather is a management failure. In many medieval towns, livestock live surprisingly close to people. Pigs might be driven through streets, chickens kept in yards, horses stabled in dense neighbourhoods, and cattle brought in for market. Urban authorities often tried to regulate animals because animals, with admirable consistency, ignored boundaries, ate things, fouled lane-ins, and wandered where they should not. If you have ever seen a modern dog refuse to come inside during rain, you understand the administrative challenge. Something skitters in the straw, you look down too quickly, which makes the keeper smile without showing teeth. A mouse flashes along the wall and vanishes beneath a plank, then another, or perhaps the same one with excellent dramatic timing. The cat, still near the hearth inside, is clearly failing in its duties, though perhaps it prefers strategic patience. Rodents are part of the knight's hidden household. They live in walls, thatch, stores, stables, granaries, and human irritation. They chew sacks, spoil food, and invite traps, cats, curses, and prayers. You hear faint scratching behind the boards and imagine tiny lives continuing alongside yours. Warm where they can be, hungry where they must be. Medieval domestic life is never only human. It is shared with creatures invited, tolerated, hunted, or impossible to remove. An odd belief once attached to animals in many European communities is that their behaviour could forecast weather or danger. Restless horses, silent birds, mice moving indoors, dogs howling, hens refusing to roost neatly, all might be read as signs. Some of this is practical observation. Animals really do react to pressure, cold, smell or sound before people notice. Some of it is storytelling stitched to survival. Tonight, the hens are grumbling, the mule is sulking, the dog is conserving energy, and the mouse is flourishing. From this, you scientifically conclude that winter remains inconvenient. Interpreters of medieval daily life continue to wrestle with how far such animal signs were treated as serious knowledge rather than everyday talk. A farmer's weather wisdom, a charm, a proverb, and a joke told beside a stable wall can look similar after centuries have passed. You suspect the keeper would not care what category it belongs to. If the dog barks at midnight, he wakes. That is enough theory for him. Yelp loosen a strap from the mule's harness. The leather is stiff with cold, dark where wet, and smells of oil and animal heat. Your fingers fumble at the buckle. The keeper lets you struggle just long enough to learn, then shows you the angle. Not force, pressure, lift here, pull there. The strap slips free. It is such a small victory that you almost feel proud, which is dangerous, because the mule immediately swings its head and nearly bumps your shoulder. The keeper murmurs something to it, not soft in the sentimental way, but low and even. Animals know tone. The mule settles. In the house, the cat finally appears, flowing through the doorway with exaggerated leisure. It pauses, sees the dog, sees the mouse hole, sees the hens, sees you, and makes no visible commitment. Then it sits beside the stable threshold and begins washing one paw. A professional, clearly. The boy comes in carrying a small pail of water that has been kept from freezing by being stored near the hearth. He pours some into a trough the mule drinks with deep, pulling sounds. Water is heavy, awkward, and essential. In freezing weather, every bucket becomes a task. Wells can ice at the rim, troughs freeze, hands go numb carrying what animals require without gratitude. The boy wipes his nose on his sleeve and looks at the mule as if awaiting thanks. None arrives. You hear the storm through the stable boards. The animals hear it too. The hens tuck deeper into themselves. The dog lowers its head onto its paws. The mule chews, steady and loud. The sound travels through you, grounding you after the cold height of the wall walk. There is something deeply old about animals at night under shelter while snow falls outside. Human history leans against them. Cities, markets, armies, farms, pilgrimages, marriages, funerals, all carried at some point on backs, hooves, wheels, and stubborn legs. The keeper checks the latch on the stable door, then the pack belonging to the cloth seller, making sure it remains sealed and dry. Trust is kind, but verification is warmer. He tells the boy to add straw where the snow melt has pooled. The boy obeys with the tragic expression of someone oppressed by basic chores. You step back toward the inner room. The firelight spills through the doorway, softer than the lantern. Behind you. The mule breathes and the dog sighs. The hens mutter once more, then quiet. The mouse, perhaps emboldened by everyone's fatigue, scratches invisibly within the wall. You remember the scratched marks by the door, the taps on stone, the careful keys, the curfew bell, the woman crossing herself at the wicket. Now there are animals too, each folded into the night's defences. The dog listens, the mule warns by stirring. The hens complain at existence. The cat supervises mystery. Even the mouse, unwanted tenant, proves the house is alive in every crevice. When you sit again near the hearth, the warmth feels fuller because you have just visited the breathing dark beside it. The gatehouse is not simply stone and timber. It is a layered shelter of people and animals, rules and instincts, smoke and straw, all waiting out the storm together. When you return from the stable corner, the room seems smaller than before, perhaps because your body is finally tired enough to measure it honestly. The hearth glows lower now. Flames still rise when a pocket of dry wood catches, but much of the fire has settled into coals, red beneath ash, breathing heat rather than declaring it. The keeper's wife takes a long iron tool and draws the embers inward. She works slowly, banking the fire so it will last. Fire, like every other living thing in this house, must be managed through the night. Your boots go back beside the hearth. Not close enough to cook, not far enough to freeze. Your feet return to wool hose and the uncertain mercy of the floor. The boy brings in a bundle of straw from a storage nook, and the smell changes at once. Dry stalks, dust, field memory, faint sweetness. He spreads it near the wall opposite the doorway, where the worst drafts do not reach. This is not the private bedroom of modern dreams. No soft mattress, no closed door, no little bedside table with a tasteful lamp and a book you pretend you will read. Here, sleep is arranged where space permits and work allows. The keeper pulls a rolled pallet from the bench storage. It is a sack stuffed with straw, chaff or perhaps old hay, flattened by use and smelling of smoke, wool and many nights. You help shake it out. Dust rises in the firelight. The cat sneezes once, offended by the atmosphere despite being partly responsible for it. A simple straw mattress like this is common enough for people of modest means, though bedding varies widely by wealth. Region and century. The richest sleep on feather beds, with linen sheets, curtains, and textiles that announce status even in the dark. Many ordinary people sleep on straw, woolen covers, skins, benches, or shared beds. Comfort exists, but it is unevenly distributed. Like almost everything else, you kneel to smooth the pallet. The straw inside shifts under your hands with a dry whisper. It will be lumpy. You already know this. Medieval bedding is a negotiation, not a promise. If you find a hollow for your hip and a place where no stalk jabs your ribs, you take the victory and do not brag in case fate is listening. The keeper's wife hands you a wool blanket. It is thick, scratchy, and slightly damp at one edge, though warm from hanging near the hearth. It smells of lanolin, smoke, and the household. You accept it with gratitude that is only partly theatrical. A second covering, older and patched, is folded at the end of the pallet. The keeper and his family have their own places, though the arrangement is flexible enough to shift with guests. Watch schedules, illness, and cold, tonight. Bodies will be placed according to usefulness, warmth, and who is most likely to need to rise quickly. The keeper sleeps closest to the keys. You notice that immediately. His pallet is not grander than yours, but it lies near the inner wall, within reach of the peg where the keyring hangs. The staff rests beside him. The lantern, covered but ready, sits on the table. The doorway to the gate passage remains visible from where he will lie. Even at rest, the room is organised around response. Sleep is permitted, not surrendered to. A small curtain or hanging cloth divides one corner. Though it offers more suggestion than privacy, behind it, the wife arranges a sleeping space for herself and perhaps a child, another child, or apprentice. Curls near the bench, wrapped in a cloak. Shared sleeping was ordinary in many medieval households. Especially among people with limited space, beds were expensive. Heated rooms were valuable. And privacy was not the everyday expectation it later became for many. If you're imagining your own personal chamber with fresh sheets and a lock, that is adorable. The 13th century sends its regards and a flea. Ah yes, the flea. The moment you think of it, you feel an imaginary itch at your ankle. Straw bedding, wool textiles, animals nearby, and crowded living create opportunities for fleas. Lice and other tiny medieval roommates. People used combs, washing, airing, herbs, smoke, and sheer determination to manage them. But total victory was not exactly on the menu. One rather peculiar household trick recorded in later traditions involved using sticky substances, furs, or cloths to attract fleas away from the sleeper. Whether tonight's household has such tactics, you cannot tell. The cat appears to believe the best solution is simply to sleep where everyone else wishes to be. Specialists remain cautious about turning scattered references to vermin into a single picture of medieval hygiene. Some people washed often, combed carefully, changed linens when they could, and valued cleanliness within their means. Others lived in conditions that made pests hard to avoid. Climate, wealth, occupation, and seasonal matter, a gatehouse in a storm, with animals close by and travellers passing through, is not a monastery infirmary with carefully laundered sheets. It is very much itself. You lower yourself onto the straw pallet. It crackles beneath you, louder than expected. Everyone in the room could hear it if they cared, but no one reacts. The first sensation is firmness, then lumps, then a surprisingly good pocket beneath your shoulder. You shift slightly. The straw answers with another whispering crunch. Your blanket goes over your legs, then your chest. Scratchy wool brushes your chin. The texture would offend a luxury hotel reviewer, which is pleasing to imagine for a moment. The floor's cold rises through the bedding, but lowly. The hearth sends warmth across the room in waves. It never reaches evenly, yet the blanket traps enough of your own heat to make a little climate under the wool. You tuck the edge near your side. There, a small enclosed world, breath, wool, smoke, straw, and the muted thud of your heart. Around you, the household prepares for sleep without ceremony. Bowls are rinsed with a little water and wiped. The pot is moved aside. Embers are covered. The boy is sent to relieve himself before settling, with a warning that he will not be stepping over everyone later unless he wants to be cursed by 3 generations of tired people. He rolls his eyes, but he goes. Some things are universal. Teenagers and inconvenient bodily needs have survived every empire. The keeper checks the door one more time, not the great gate, not yet, but the room door, the stable latch, the shutter. His hand touches each point: latch, peg, cover, bar. It is a little map of security drawn in movement. You have seen this before now, with the gate locks, the wall walk, the animals. Petitions the lullaby of safety. The wife murmurs a prayer in a low voice. The words are familiar to the others and mostly lost to you. Christian prayer shaped the rhythms of medieval night, from formal offices in monasteries to household blessings whispered over children, fire, doors, and sleep. The boundary between devotion and protection is soft here. To pray before sleeping in a storm is not merely pious. It is practical in the emotional sense. The night is large. Words make a shelter too. You lie on your back and look up. The rafters vanish into smoky darkness. Firelight moves faintly over them, revealing blackened beams, hanging herbs, a loop of rope, the underside of the loft boards. Drop of water from some damp garment falls into straw near the hearth. The dog sighs in the stable. The mule shifts a hoof. The cat steps over your blanket without asking permission and settles near your feet, a warm weight that makes you forgive every mouse it has ignored. Privacy, you realise, is not the comfort offered here. The comfort is presence, other breathing nearby, someone who knows the locks, someone who can read the weather, someone who banked the fire before lying down, someone who will hear the gate if it speaks. Outside, the storm continues. But inside the house, the night folds itself around the sleepers one layer at a time, wool over knees, straw under shoulders, smoke in the rafters, keys on the peg, stone around all. You lie still long enough for the room to rearrange itself in darkness. At first, you notice every discomfort. The straw presses a ridge beneath your shoulder. The wool scratches at your neck. One foot is warm because the cat has chosen it, and the other remains abandoned to the larger climate of the room. Smoke rests in the rafters. The stones hold their cold. Your nose is not exactly freezing, but it is considering the idea. Then, slowly, the discomforts become part of the bedding. The house grows quieter, but it does not become silent. Silence belongs to paintings, not to medieval nights. The fire shifts and sends a small collapse of ash inward with a soft sigh. A coal breaks open, glowing brighter for a breath, then darkening again. The pot, moved away from direct heat, gives an occasional thick bubble, as if supper is dreaming of itself, somewhere near the wall. A mouse scratches, pauses, then scratches again with the determination of a tiny clerk completing paperwork. The keeper's breathing deepens first, not fully asleep, perhaps, but travelling in that direction by a road he knows well. His wife turns once behind the hanging cloth, and the cloth stirs in the firelight. The boy near the bench gives a sudden sniff and settles deeper under his cloak. From the stable, the mule exhales a long, grassy breath. The dog answers with a sigh. The hens are finally quiet, which suggests either peace or resentment too deep for words. Beyond the room, the city after curfew begins its own soft performance. You hear a latch lifted somewhere in the lane, then set carefully back. A footstep, cautious on snow. A murmur, quickly hushed. Perhaps someone has gone to check a shutter, bank a fire, or tend a child. Perhaps someone is doing something they would rather not explain to the watch. The night watch existed partly because medieval towns were crowded with flame, goods, animals, strangers, an opportunity. Curfew did not turn every resident into a saint, it simply made misbehaviour more noticeable, which is rude but useful. A bell sounds in the distance, not the curfew bell now, but a church bell marking one of the night hours. Its tone is faint, broken by the window and walls. Monastic communities followed of formal night offices, rising for prayer while most lay people slept. And town churches also shaped time through bells. Even people who did not know the hour by a clock could know it by sound, by routine. By the way darkness had thickened or begun to thin. Time here is not glowing digits, it is metal in the air. You listen to the bell fade. A moment later, a dog barks somewhere inside the town. Another dog answers farther away. Then a third joins in for no clear reason except that dogs have always enjoyed forming committees. The old dog in the stable lifts its head, decides this is not its meeting, and lowers it again. Excellent leadership. The storm presses harder. Snow grains strike the shutter like handfuls of sand. Wind moves along the wall outside and finds tiny gaps in the construction. It does not roar constantly. It changes its voice. It whistles at one crack, hums at another, and at the gate passage below it makes a hollow. Wooden moan that rises and falls like someone drawing a bow across a large instrument. The great doors are playing the weather. Your eyes are closed now, but your hearing sharpens. You can picture the room from sound alone, the hearth at your left, the keeper near the keys, the boy by the bench, the cat at your feet, warm, smug, and probably dreaming of a universe where mice bring themselves directly to its mouth. The stable beyond, breathing, the gate passage beyond that, barred, the road beyond that, erased. Medieval towns were not quiet places even at night. Animals, bells, wheels, watch calls, prayers, drunken songs, coughing, childbirth, quarrels, mills, water, weather, and work before dawn could all break the dark. Yet compared with modern electric life, the night soundscape had different edges. No engines, no constant mechanical hum, no refrigerator clicking awake like a tiny haunted cupboard. Instead, there is the body of the town itself wood, stone hoof throat flame bell. A small curious practice floats up from stories of night watchmen in various towns. Some called the hours aloud as they walked, announcing not only time but also that all was well, or that fire should be guarded. Later traditions preserve cries like past midnight, or warnings to look to candle and fire. Not every town did it the same way, and your watchman tonight may be too cold to waste poetry, but you imagine a muffled voice somewhere beyond the lane calling into snow, a human thread thrown across darkness. Researchers who study urban sound have to work with fragments regulations, complaints, bells described in chronicles, court cases about noisy neighbours, and the physical layout of streets that carried sound in narrow channels. So when anyone claims to know exactly how a medieval town sounded at 2 a.m, you may gently tuck a blanket around that claim and let it rest. The truth is probably varied, local, and full of coughing. A shutter bangs somewhere nearby. Your eyes open. No one moves at first, then the keeper inhales. Not sharply, just enough to show he has heard. The bang comes again, followed by a scrape. Wind, perhaps. A loose latch. A person. The keeper waits. His restraint is unnerving. You want to ask whether that was nothing, because modern people love naming things nothing before they know. He listens another moment, then slowly pushes himself upright. The keys give the faintest clink. The sound settles your nerves more than it should. Here is order. Here is someone who knows the difference between waking and rising. He does not light the lantern at once. He looks toward the shutter, toward the door, toward the hanging cloth where his wife is now awake too. The bang does not repeat. A gust pushes snow against the wall, then moves on. The keeper remains seated. At last, he lies back down. Only wind. Then, or a loose shutter that will be cursed properly in the morning, you breathe again, realizing you'd been holding still with your whole body. The cat at your feet has not moved. This either proves the danger is imaginary, or that the cat has a selective commitment to household defense. Remember the mouse exactly. Sleep comes near, then withdraws. The city's sounds keep stitching the night around you. A baby cries again, farther away this time. A cartwheel creaks in some distant yard, perhaps being moved under cover. Somewhere, faintly, a human voice sings a line and stops. It may be a drunk, a worker, a mother, or someone praying through fear. The snow takes the song before you can understand it. You turn slightly onto your side, straw crackles beneath you. The blanket pulls tight over one shoulder. Your breath warms a small pocket near your face. The smoky smell has become less sharp now, familiar enough to fade. The room is a dark bowl holding embers and bodies. Outside, the storm keeps speaking in its changing tongues. You think of the gate as a great ear in the wall, hearing the road, the town, the animals, the weather, and all the little human attempts to endure until morning. You're inside that ear, listening too, not guarding exactly, not trusted yet, but learning. The night is not empty. It is crowded with small sounds, each one asking whether it matters. The keeper's house answers by staying warm enough, locked enough, awake enough. And slowly, with the bell's last echo gone and the snow softening every hard edge of the city, your thoughts begin to loosen. Your thoughts loosen, then gather again around the sound of wind. It moves above the gatehouse roof with a worrying intelligence, as if it has been studying the building all evening and has finally found several promising weaknesses. The rafters answer in small creaks. A shutter gives one tired knock, then settles. The snow hisses against stone somewhere in the stable. The mule shifts, and the straw replies with a dry rustle. You do not sleep yet. You hover. The room is dark except for the red pulse of the banked fire. Coals breathe under ash, brightening when a draught reaches them, dimming when the air stills. Their light is not enough to see by, but enough to imagine by. The keys on the wall become a black shape. The keeper's outline is a low mound under wool. The hanging cloth in the corner rises and falls faintly when the wife breathes behind it. The cat has become heavy at your feet, a small warm tyranny. Outside, the storm is now more than weather, at this hour, half waking, half dreaming. You understand why people read meaning in it. A hard gust presses against the gate and the whole passage below gives a hollow boom. You tense. The keeper does not rise, but his breathing changes, even asleep. He's listening. The storm repeats the sound, softer, not a fist, not a cart, not a voice. Only air and timber, yet in darkness, only as a brave little word. People in the Middle Ages watched weather with care because weather was not a topic for small talk alone. It shaped harvests, roads, health, hunger, prices, travel, and whether a town could receive supplies. A winter storm could delay grain carts, trap travellers, freeze mills, damage roofs, and turn a simple errand into an expedition worthy of an overconfident uncle. The sky was practical business. You think of the fields beyond the wall, hidden under snow, wheat or rye lying dormant, hedges bowed white, ditches filling, villages tucked low against the wind. For those outside the city, the storm is not picturesque. It is lost time, chilled livestock, blocked lanes, maybe a roof that leaks onto the only dry bedding. Inside the gatehouse, the wall gives shelter, but even here the weather enters by sound, smell, damp, and worry. The keeper's wife murmurs in her sleep, or perhaps she is awake and praying softly. The words blur into the crackle of the coals. Saints were often called upon for protection from weather, sickness, travel danger, and the ordinary hazards that made up most lives. St. Nicholas for travellers and sailors in some regions, St. Christopher for safe passage, St. Barbara against sudden death and storms in later devotion, and many local saints whose help was known best near their own shrines. Medieval religion lived not only in grand cathedrals, but in whispered requests under scratchy blankets. Near the hearth, a bundle of dried herbs hangs from a beam. In the red dimness, it looks like a sleeping bird. Some may be for cooking, some for scent, some for household use when coughs. Stomach pains, fleas, or anxious aids require intervention. Rosemary, rue, sage, mugwort, yarrow, or whatever grows nearby and survives local belief. You're not sure which plants these are from here, and frankly neither are half the people who later write confidently about medieval herbs on decorative posters. A curious scrap of weather lore comes to mind rings around the moon. Restless animals, smoke blowing downward, aches in old bones, the behaviour of birds, and the colour of dawn were all used in various folk traditions to predict coming weather. Some observations had a practical basis. A halo around the moon can relate to ice crystals high in the atmosphere and may suggest changing conditions. Other signs were more poetic than precise. Still, when your roof is patched with hope and your road is under snow, you use every clue the world offers. There is still lively disagreement among medievalists, folklorists, and historians of science about where to draw the line between observation, inherited proverb, religious interpretation, and what later writers called superstition. The same person might note cloud direction, mutter a charm, trust a saint, and also make sure the door latch is properly fastened. That is not confusion. That is a sensible person using a whole toolbox. A gust drives smoke down the flue. It slips into the room, low and bitter, making your nose sting. The wife coughs once behind the hanging cloth. The keeper rolls, wakes enough to listen, then reaches for the poker without fully rising. He nudges the banked coals, adjusts the ash, and waits. The smoke thins. He lies down again. It's done so smoothly that you realise he has performed this half asleep many times. In winter, even breathing the room requires practice. Your own breathing becomes shallow until the air clears. You taste soot at the back of your throat. Warmth, smoke, weather, prayer. They all mingle. The wind outside changes direction, or seems to. It no longer pushes straight at the gate, but slides along the wall with a long, low whine. Snow finds the shutter again. Tick, tick, tick. The sound becomes almost like beads poured gently into a wooden bowl. You let it count for you. 1. The ditch outside filling with white. 2. The bridge buried under a soft skin of danger. 3. The road beyond, empty for now. 4. The city roofs, each holding its own little burden. 5. The gatekeeper's keys, dark and still. You remember the man with the cloth samples invoking St. Martin, perhaps sincerely, perhaps for dramatic flavour. You remember the woman crossing herself as she came through the wicket. You remember the possible scratched marks near the door, the tap on the parapet, the iron poker laid across the hearth edge. All evening, protection has appeared in layers: wood, iron, stone, law, habit, prayer, memory, suspicion, kindness. No single layer is enough. Together they make a shelter. A faint blue flicker appears at the edge of the shutter, then vanishes. Lightning. Perhaps winter thunderstorms are not impossible, though rare in many places, or maybe it is merely your tired eyes catching a coal flare. A moment later comes no thunder, only the continuing wind. The room remains still. For a few breaths, you imagine how the storm might be described tomorrow. The keeper may say it was a hard blow from the north. His wife may say the smoke turned twice and the hens would not settle. The boy may say the snow reached the hinge on the stable door because that is measurable and therefore excellent. A priest may mention divine mercy if no roofs fell. A merchant may mention ruined roads. A farmer may mention worry for the animals. Weather is never one story. It changes according to who must pay for it. Your body sinks deeper into the straw. The ridge under your shoulder is no longer sharp. The wool blanket holds a pocket of warmth. Even the smoke, now thinner, feels woven into the night rather than attacking it. Outside, The storm continues its long argument with the city wall. But the wall has heard worse. Stones remember other winters, other winds, other gatekeepers sleeping lightly beside other fires. You are beginning to trust the room in pieces. Not completely. Complete trust would be foolish and possibly damp. But you trust the bar in the gate, you trust the keeper's ear, you trust the coals under ash, you trust the cat's warm weight, though not its professional ethics. You trust morning exists somewhere beyond the snow, even if it has not yet given evidence. The wind softens for a moment, and in that pause the city seems very far away and very near at once. A bell chain shifts somewhere in a tower. A dog dreams. The mule chews once, slowly, as though finishing a thought. The herbs above the hearth turn gently in the draught. You let your eyes close again. The storm has not ended. It has only become part of the house, part of the breathing, part of the old winter language spoken by walls, roofs, animals, saints, sleepers, and those who keep watch at the edge of town. The old winter language grows quieter, then changes. At first it is only a difference in the storm, a break in the steady hiss of snow against the shutter. Your body notices before your mind does. The keeper notices too. You know because the shape of him under his blanket tightens. He's still lying down, still almost asleep, but the room has shifted around his attention. Then comes a knock. Not the broad push of wind against the gate, not the rattle of a loose shutter. This is smaller, sharper, deliberate. 3 taps, a pause, 2 more. The cat at your feet lifts its head. That alone feels significant. If the cat is willing to interrupt its own comfort, the universe may indeed be doing something. The keeper sits up, no groan, no dramatic speech, just a man rising from sleep into work. His hand finds the keys by memory. They give a muted clink as he lifts them from the peg. His wife is awake behind the hanging cloth, though she does not speak. The boy, pretending to sleep near the bench, opens one eye and immediately closes it again, which is a bold but unconvincing strategy. You push yourself onto one elbow. Straw crackles beneath you. Your mouth is dry. The room is still dim, red at the hearth, black in the corners. The knock comes again, this time from the inner side of the gatehouse, from the passage that faces the town rather than the road. That is different. Someone inside the city wants the gatekeeper. The keeper reaches for the lantern, trims the wick with practiced fingers, and coaxes the flame larger. Yellow light returns to the room in a soft, uneven circle. Everyone looks older in it, or perhaps everyone looks more medieval when awakened after midnight by suspicious tapping. He opens the inner door only a hand's breadth. Chain still set. A voice whispers from the other side. You catch fragments. Officer, search, warehouse, South Lane. The keeper listens, then lets the speaker in. A man steps into the room wearing a heavy cloak dusted with snow. He carries the smell of outside lanes with him, cold air, wet wool, smoke, and the sour trace of old tallow. He's not a noble, but he has authority in his posture, a town sergeant, perhaps, or a watch officer sent from another gate or ward. At his belt hangs a cudgel. His cheeks are red from weather, and his eyebrows have collected frost. Behind him stands a second man, younger, holding a covered lantern close to his chest. He looks worried enough to be either guilty or merely awake. The town officer speaks low. There has been a report of goods moved after curfew, perhaps smuggled cloth, perhaps untaxed wine, perhaps nothing but a neighbour with sharp ears and a grudge. In a walled town, the gate is where lawful movement is supposed to happen. If goods appear in a warehouse without being counted at the gate, someone has either made a mistake, lied, or found a creative way to avoid civic revenue. Medieval towns could be very patient with many things. Lost toll money was not one of them. Urban authorities often regulated trade carefully, with tolls, market rules, weights, measures, and inspections. These were not just fussy rules invented by people who loved parchment. They protected revenue, monitored quality, and helped maintain order in crowded commercial spaces, naturally. People tried to dodge them. The human relationship with fees has always been tender and complicated. The officer asks whether any late goods entered tonight besides the cloth seller's pack. The keeper answers with names, order, and details. Cloth samples, 1 mule, 1 basket belonging to the village woman. No cart, no barrels, no wine, no extra bales. His memory is clear because it has to be. The gatehouse is an archive with a heartbeat. The officer asks to see the tally. The keeper takes the notched stick and the small wax tablet from the table. The lantern light shines on cuts, marks, and scratched notes. The officer studies them, lips moving slightly as he counts. You sit wrapped in your blanket, trying to look useful and not like someone who was asleep beside a cat 2 minutes ago. A strange little practice appears in the officer's caution. In some places, goods could be hidden in false-bottomed carts, tucked beneath straw, disguised under firewood, or carried in by servants in small lots to avoid notice. People have always been inventive when a fee stands between them and profit. One late medieval complaint from various towns and regions after another points to illicit trading, forestalling, re-grating, or smuggling in different forms. The vocabulary changes, but the mood is familiar. Someone is getting away with something, and officials are annoyed. The younger man shifts from foot to foot. The keeper's wife watches him with a look that could peel bark. He avoids her eyes. You wonder whether he reported the matter or is suspected in it. The room feels tighter now, every sleeping pallet turned into a witness. The officer asks about the merchant near Bridge Street, the one expecting the cloth seller. The keeper says a runner was sent to confirm. The boy, suddenly awake enough to defend his own labour, mutters that he went with Tom from the lane and saw the merchant servant open the door. The wife gives him a warning glance, not because he is wrong, but because interrupting officials before dawn is an art best learned slowly. The officer nods. The cloth seller may be honest then, or honest tonight. These categories are apparently separate. People who study medieval urban records often find tension between official rules and everyday compromise. A town might forbid movement after curfew, restrict who could lodge strangers, or demand that goods enter only through proper gates. Yet real life brought storms, kinship, bribery, emergency, privilege, and fatigue. The surviving ordinances can sound tidy. The actual night, as you are discovering from a straw pallet, is not tidy at all. Then comes another sound from the outer gate. A scrape. Everyone freezes. The officer turns his head. The younger man's eyes widen. The keeper lifts one hand, and every breath in the room becomes careful. The scrape comes again, low against timber. Not a full knock, not wind, something at the base of the gate. The keeper takes his staff. The officer uncovers his lantern. You stand before deciding whether standing is wise. Your blanket slides from your shoulders. Cold finds you at once. The cat abandons your feet, deeply offended by the decline in service. The group moves into the gate passage. It is black and cold, with the faint grey seam of snow under the great doors. The lanterns paint the bar, bolts and chains in trembling gold. The scrape sounds a third time, followed by a soft thud. Something has been pushed against the outside of the wicket. The keeper does not open it. He bends near the speaking hatch and waits. No voice comes. He slides the cover back barely an inch. Snow spits through. Who's there? He calls. No answer. The officer steps closer, staff raised. The keeper calls again, still nothing but storm. Then the dog in the stable begins to growl, low and steady. That sound moves through your body more effectively than any bell. The keeper closes the hatch. He gestures to the younger man to go up to the wall walk and look down from above. The young man hesitates just long enough to reveal that he hates this idea with every piece of his soul, then obeys. Footsteps climb the stair. The boards creak overhead. Wind enters briefly as the upper door opens. You wait in the passage. Your toes are cold through your hose. Your heart is louder than you would like. You imagine smugglers, beggars, thieves, an injured traveller, a sack of illicit goods, a drunk, a child, a prank, a wolf, which is unlikely, but the mind enjoys being unhelpful at night. A voice calls from above, "Bundle." The keeper looks up. What sort of paws? Sack or cloak? Sack or can't tell. No man standing. The officer curses under his breath without using a word worth preserving. The keeper makes a decision. The wicket will be opened only enough to draw the object in with a hook. No person admitted. No wide gap. No foolish drama. Medieval caution is not cowardice. It is how people avoid becoming examples in sermons. The bolt is lifted. The key turns. The wicket opens a narrow span, and winter surges through. Snow scatters across the passage floor. The keeper uses a hooked pole to drag in a small bundled sack tied with cord. The door shuts again at once. Inside the passage, the sack lies in the lantern light. Not a person, not a child, not a wolf. Thank you very much. The officer kneels and loosens the cord. The cloth falls open. Inside are 2 small parcels wrapped in waxed linen, and a flat wooden token marked with a sign you do not recognize. Smuggled goods, perhaps, or a message, or bait. The keeper's wife, who has appeared silently behind you because apparently everyone in this house can move like a ghost except you, and the mule looks at the token. Her face changes. "That mark," she says softly, "belongs to the river warehouse." The officer stands very still. The storm continues outside, innocent as ever. You look at the closed gate, at the snow melting on the stones, at the little parcels lying between official law and midnight secrecy. A gate keeps people out, yes, but goods, rumours, debts, favours, and trouble have smaller bodies. They slip through cracks, arrive in bundles, and wait until the tired hour when everyone wants only sleep. The keeper locks the wicket again. Bolt, key, bar. The sound is firm, but the night no longer feels settled. Somewhere beyond the gate, someone has come close enough to leave a secret and vanish into the snow. Somewhere inside the city, someone may be waiting for it. And you, who only wanted to sleep in a warm corner beside the hearth, now understand why the keeper keeps his boots within reach. The little parcels remain on the table long after the officer has gone. They sit beside the tally stick, the cup, the dull knife, and the lantern, looking far too small for the attention they have gathered. Waxed linen, cord, a mark token, a faint smell of damp river warehouses and secrecy. The keeper has not opened the parcels fully. That will be done in front of the right official at a less miserable hour, assuming the right official can be made to leave his bed, which may be the real challenge of urban government. The town officer has taken the wooden token with him. Wrapped in cloth and tucked under his cloak, he left through the inner lane, the younger man following, both swallowed by the city's snowy dark. Their footprints will blur before dawn. The gatehouse door closed behind them, and the room seemed to exhale, but not completely. Trouble, once admitted, lingers like smoke, and smoke is already present enough. A gust comes down the flue again, carrying a bitter tongue of soot into the room. It crawls low first, then spreads, blurring the lantern flame and pricking your eyes. You cough into your blanket. The keeper's wife rises from her corner with the patience of a person who's been annoyed by the same roof for years. She adjusts the hearth, shifts the ash, and opens the shutter a finger's width on the town side. Cold slips in, smoke slips out, or at least pretends to. You sit up, blanket around your shoulders, and feel the room's air as a layered thing. Warm near the coals, cold near the floor, smoky above, damp everywhere. The storm has soaked boots, cloaks, straw, stable boards, and the very breath of the house. Every person here exhales moisture into the same small space. Every garment drying by the hearth releases the road back into the room. It is cosy in the way a cupboard full of wet sheep would be cosy, which is to say memorable. In many medieval homes, indoor air could be smoky, especially where hearths were open or chimney systems were inefficient. Chimneys became more common over time, but their design, cost, and effectiveness varied widely. Smoke-blackened rafters and sooty walls are not rare survivals because people love dramatic ceilings. They are the residue of warmth doing business indoors. The keeper crouches near the fire and adds a small piece of dry wood, precious enough to be chosen carefully. It catches with a quick yellow flicker. Light returns to the damp edges of the room. Your eyes water, but your shoulders loosen. Humans are unreasonable creatures. We cough from smoke, then lean closer to it because it is warm. The fire harms and saves in the same breath. The wife hands you a cloth and gestures toward your hair, where melted snow and soot have made a small disaster. You wipe your face, then your neck. The cloth comes away grey, elegant. You are now part of the room's interior finish. A bowl of warmish water is set near the hearth, not for indulgent bathing, but for practical wiping of hands and faces. Medieval people did wash. Not always as often as modern standards would demand, and not always with abundant hot water, but the old idea that everyone simply enjoyed filth is lazy storytelling. Washing hands before meals, cleaning faces, laundering linens where possible, visiting bathhouses in some towns and periods, all of this existed. Cleanliness, like comfort, depended on place, money, season, and access to water. Tonight, the water is rationed because every bucket has weight and every trip to the well is a small punishment. You dip your fingers. The water is no longer truly warm, but it feels good anyway. Soot loosens from your knuckles, dirt gathers beneath your nails. Your skin's cracked from cold. A little redness runs across the backs of your hands where the wind has bitten. The keeper's wife notices and gives you a smear of fat mixed perhaps with herbs, or perhaps just fat with confidence. You rub it over your hands. It smells faintly of animal, smoke, and something green. It leaves a shine. It also helps, medieval remedies for winter skin. Coughs and aches often used ingredients close at hand fats. Oils, herbs, honey, ale, vinegar, cloth wrapping, steam, and prayer, depending on the household and the complaint. Some would soothe, some would do little. Some would make a modern doctor blink slowly and change the subject. One odd household belief attached to sickness and air concerns the idea of bad smells. People often associated foul air with illness. Long before germ theory explained disease differently, sweet herbs, incense, smoke, vinegar, and fragrant substances were used to improve or protect the air. In certain circumstances, this made practical sense, at least emotionally and sometimes hygienically. In others, it was like spraying perfume on a collapsed stable and calling it medicine. Still, if your room smells of wet boots, mule breath, and fear, a sprig of rosemary begins to look like a public health policy. The question of how medieval people understood winter illness is complicated, and modern experts resist reducing it to simple ignorance. Learned medicine drew on humoral theory, balancing hot, cold, wet and dry qualities in the body. Household practice drew on experience, tradition, religion, and local knowledge. A cough might be explained through cold, damp air, phlegm, divine testing, poor diet, or simple exposure. More than one explanation could live in the same room without fighting. Unlike people at supper, the boy coughs in his sleep near the bench. His mother looks toward him immediately. She listens for several breaths, then relaxes. Not a deep cough, not yet. She pulls his cloak higher. The gesture is quick and soft. This is another kind of watch, as serious as guarding the gate, listening for sickness, judging the sound of breath, knowing when a child is too warm, too cold, too quiet. The parcels on the table still wait. You glance at them again, but the keeper shakes his head and faintly. Not tonight. The law can sleep in waxed linen until morning. There are other duties more immediate than curiosity. Keep the fire breathing. Keep the smoke moving upward if possible. Keep damp wool from moulding. Keep sleepers warm enough. Keep strangers out. Keep disease away if it can be bargained with. He checks the drying boots. One of yours has stiffened near the toe. He presses it with his thumb and moves it farther from the heat. Too fast. Remember, slow. The same rule applies to bodies. Perhaps. Warm too fast and pain wakes. Work too long and judgment cracks. Sleep too deeply and the gate might speak without you. Your blanket has absorbed some warmth now, and when you settle it around your shoulders, you feel the comfort more fully. But the room is close. Shared air moves from mouth to mouth, hearth to rafters, stable to bedding. The dog's breath, the mule's steam, the child's cough, your own soot-marked hands, the wife's herbs, the keeper's damp cloak, all circulate under the low roof. A modern person might open windows, adjust a thermostat, switch on a fan, and perhaps complain online. Here, the solution is a cracked shutter, careful banking of coals, and endurance with a cloth over the nose when necessary. The fire settles again. Smoke thins to a blue strand. The shutter is closed. The cold that entered phases under the returning heat. The room's smells soften into one another until no single one dominates. Ash, wool, fat on your hands, straw, wet leather, old stone. You breathe through it, slowly, and find that your body is learning what to ignore. The keeper lies down once more, though he leaves the lantern turned low rather than fully covered. The parcels remain within sight. The keys return to the peg. The staff returns beside his bedding. The wife slips back behind the cloth, after checking the boy's forehead with the inside of her wrist. The cat, having decided the emergency has passed and your feet are still useful, steps delicately over the straw and settles against your ankles again. You lower yourself onto the pallet. Straw crackles, but less loudly now, as if it too is tired. The smoke has made your eyes heavy. Your throat is rough. Your hands smell of the greasy salve. Strangely, the discomfort comforts you. It proves that warmth is present. People are present. The house is alive enough to be imperfect. Outside, the storm continues beyond the walls, pushing cold against timber and stone. Inside, warmth and smoke, dampness and breath. Worry and care mingle in the low gatehouse chamber. You understand that winter health here is not the absence of danger. It is the nightly labour of holding danger back by inches, with coals, cloth, herbs, fat, listening, and a stubborn refusal to let the dark have everything. The room settles again. But it does not return to exactly what it was. The parcels on the table have changed the air, even though they are only folded linen and cord. The gatehouse has remembered that it is not merely a home, it is a place where the city's business, secrets, travellers, animals, weather, and weary bodies all end up pressed together under one smoky roof. You lie on the straw and listen to the household breathing around you. The keeper breathes low and controlled, the sort of sleep that never goes far from waking. His wife breathes more softly behind the hanging cloth, though every now and then she shifts, perhaps listening to the boy's cough, perhaps listening to the storm, perhaps simply unable to surrender fully while the fire still needs watching. The boy is curled near the bench, his knees tucked up, one hand under his cheek. A younger child, whom you barely noticed earlier among the shadows and tasks, sleeps in a small nest of folded cloth near the wall, wrapped so thoroughly that only a nose and a few strands of hair appear. The child looks less like a person than a very serious bundle. In a space this narrow, family life is not separated from work. The gatehouse household lives in layers of duty: guarding, cooking, cleaning, counting, tending animals, watching children, receiving messages, drying clothes, remembering faces, and knowing which sounds matter. Whatever hour holds you, you are safe to rest now. The door is barred where it should be barred, opened where it should be opened, and the night has done all it came to do. The storm is outside the story now, fading over the fields, becoming only a hush, only a memory, only a soft white cover over the sleeping road. Sleep well, drift gently, the gate is watched. The fire is kept, and morning is already here. Sweet dreams.